Hi, and welcome to Unco, a weekly interview podcast about what's unusual in tech. I'm your host, Timothy Buck. This week's guest is Jean MacDonald, the founder of App Camp for Girls, a community manager at Micro.blog, and an early employee at Smile Software, the company behind gems like TexExpander and PDFpen. Over the past few weeks, I interviewed Christy Lawrence, the founder of Plan App, Blair Reeves, an enterprise product manager, Louis Mantilla, iconographer and founder of Parakeet, and Eric Young, who does research and strategy for NBC Universal. If you'd like to support the show and hear more interviews like these, the best way to do that is by becoming a patron at patreon.com/uncofm for as little as $1 a month. Hi, Jean. How's it going?
Hey, it's going pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing well. It's a nice, warm Sunday afternoon here in San Francisco.
Yeah, it's slightly cooler here in Portland than it has been, and I am enjoying that because it's been too hot of a summer for those of us in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, the last few weeks have been a little bit cooler down here, but in the last day or two, it warmed back up again. It's been nice. Been going on walks and stuff.
Sounds nice.
Yeah, so to kind of start off the show, it might be good to get a little background of who you are and what you do.
Sure. Well, my name's Jean MacDonald, and I live in Portland, Oregon. I think we got that squared away. And I primarily am busy these days with a company called Microdot.blog, which is a new platform for blogging that especially supports short-form blogging, microblogging, which is like tweeting, but not on Twitter. We launched about a year and a half ago, and the idea is that there's bloggers, microbloggers, have their own blogs and their own content, which they control, but we also knit them together with a layer of social interaction that is similar to, say, a Twitter timeline, but it's not a silo. And it's based on open standards and also commercial free. So that's me. I'm the community manager there, which is a big hat, which covers a lot of things. And I work together with Manton Reese, who founded and designed the platform and is the person who guides us through the sometimes rough waters of social media.
Yeah. I've read a little bit about Micro.blog, but I don't have that much context, and I'm sure some of the people listening don't either. So does each person kind of have their own server with their own microblog on it, or is it, how does that work?
It can work one of two ways. So if you have a blog, say on WordPress or something, so you're already established somewhere, you can integrate your blog with Micro.blog and have your micro posts appear on the timeline, so you can interact with the Micro.blog community. You can get comments and feedback, etc. People and make friends on Micro.blog, because honestly, it has that feel of early Twitter where it's like, hey, we're all here and we're having this really lovely conversation.
That's cool.
But if you don't have your own blog, or you don't want to mess around with the integration aspect of tying your blog to Micro.blog, Micro.blog is a hosting platform. So it is like WordPress, where for $5 a month you get a blog and you get the social aspect of it as well. And you can have your own custom domain. In fact, we very much encourage people to use custom domains with Micro.blog so that they really own their own content and can move it if they wanted to, say for whatever reason they decide to move away from Micro.blog. Their blog is their own, So even though, let's say, in my case, my handle on Microdot blog is MacGenie, which is also my Twitter handle. I have a blog at macgenie.micro.blog, but I have a custom domain that I've had for 20 years, and I've pointed at that at my Microdot Blog hosted blog, which is welltempered.net. And so it stays with me, just as it has over the last 2 decades. That's where I live on the internet. And that's one of the key things for us, is like making sure that people have their own content, their own place on the web, and aren't stuck in, what they call silos like Twitter or Facebook, where all you are on Twitter is another user. Mm-hmm. And the only way people can see your stuff is that they go to twitter.com/MacGenie, where you can see all my tweets, but it's Twitter's site. And I'm basically creating content for Twitter and for Facebook. On Microdot Blog, I'm creating my own content and then sharing it out.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's part of why I don't use Medium or any of these other things for writing, as well as I want a place on the internet that I can control, because as those type of things change their rules or change their algorithms or change mm-hmm. the way they make money or whatever it may be, you could build this whole you could build a whole following there, and then it could all disappear, and mm-hmm. you kind of have lost all of that. But I started my website, I don't know, like 5 years ago or something, at timothybuck.me. And it's nice to know that even if I completely change what I want it to be in the future, that the work that I've done to like kind of build it as a domain and build it as a place where people know they can find me, that's still going to remain, even if I decided I wanted to, I don't know, become a doctor or some random thing that had nothing to do with I don't want to do. But I would still get, the like, I don't know, I would still have that work wouldn't have been in vain, Right.
And I mean, let's face it, Twitter or Facebook can close your account. There's pretty much no recourse you have. Right. And not that they would probably, but, do you want to, as you say, build up a whole, business or a presence somewhere that you don't control? Like, you should control yourself on the internet. And the other thing, there's many like threads in this, like, and why Micro.blog came into being. Certainly the problem of harassment on social media is one of the things that's motivated us and motivated Manton to even want to have a community manager as, mm-hmm. Employee number 2 out of 2.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you about that, but you can keep going first.
Yeah. So we have, we spent a lot of time working on our community guidelines, and, we worked on them with the community, and we, because everybody on Micro.blog has their own independent location on the internet, whether they get a custom domain or not. If you're a Micro.blog hosted site, you have your own site where you're welcome to, you get to say whatever you want, but you can't necessarily say it on our timeline where there's a community. So it's not that we're so much into censorship, but we have tools in place and also human curation where we're making sure that nobody comes in and like harasses somebody else on the timeline. So we feel like that's where you can draw the line. And because unlike Twitter, we can boot you from the timeline. That doesn't affect your blog. It's not like, if somebody gets booted from Twitter, their whole timeline is gone. All their, that's the end of their presence. Mm-hmm. So we feel like that gives us actually more leeway to, make judgments about what is okay in our community. And so that's definitely been a big motivator for us, and a thing that people really like, because people are tired of the whole, just the nastiness. There's just no way.
Yeah. No, you're right. People are, I mean, I know for me, maybe like a week ago, I went through and I had been following like 1,000 people, which was just way too many. And it was just always sad, and always, I was just mad whenever I looked at Twitter.
Yeah.
And so I unfollowed like 800 people. And it's amazing how different Twitter is when you've kind of like begun to rethink the type, like the people that you're following. It went from me mostly seeing things that get a lot of likes or whatever because of the timeline in the Twitter app, mostly seeing when people are upset, and that's when like people are commenting and arguing, and so that's what you see more of. Yeah. So now it's just like people living their lives and sharing things they're interested in. It's like back to old Twitter almost. Yeah. So I've been happy to do that.
Yeah, one of the things I mean, I'm still on Twitter. I loved Twitter, and I've been on it for 11 years, and I was Twitter's biggest like fan until recently. But I still have people and community over there that I don't want to just totally turn my back on right now. But one thing that really made a big difference in my timeline is I started disabling retweets on it, pretty much everybody.
Oh.
And once you don't see the I use Tweetbot, and that's one of I don't know. I never use the official Twitter app, so if there is one even, I don't know. So I mean, this is the week where they're turning off the API for all these third-party Twitter apps. Not turning off, but they're changing it to an extent where it's not going to be that great to use a third-party app. But that's a whole nother thing, with Twitter. But in this case, disabling retweets, it was suddenly like, oh yeah, because what happens is people just retweet stuff so easily, and I don't think they think about the impact it's making, and especially like in this kind of like ranting and depressing and outrageous vibe on Twitter. It really amplifies that. And so I might be missing some happy tweets that are retweets, but mostly I think I'm only missing out on the things that would just get me mad anyway.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I'll have to look and see if you can do that. I mean, I use Tweetbot for Mac, and I used it on iOS for a long time, but when I heard that things were kind of moving this way, I started to transition over into the normal, like the default Twitter client, just because I kind of knew this was coming. But yeah, it's kind of sad.
Oh, I know. It's just well, whatever. That's an issue for everyone on Twitter who uses anything but the official app.
Yeah. So maybe to kind of step back to who you are again.
Oh, yeah.
What did you do before you ended up at Micro.blog?
Well, most recently I've been working pretty much full-time volunteer director of App Camp for Girls, which is a nonprofit that I co-founded with Gray Ostin, a iOS developer, and we launched our first camp sessions in 2013 with the idea that if we could show kids how to make apps, they would see that it's not rocket science and that they could do something and that it would help them. So, I mean, our camp is, the mission is gender equity in the technology field. So we are open to girls, to trans kids, gender non-binary or non-conforming youth. And so basically people who are, when they're adults, are going to be underrepresented in the tech industry. And I think it's one of those things is like if somebody shows you how it could be done, you can be empowered by that. It gives you like a sense of accomplishment when you create an app. You work with a team to create an app that is a working app and ends up on the App Store eventually. Mm-hmm. So that app camp. I started thinking about it in 2011 when I was at WWDC, and just being kind of overwhelmed by the fact that it was all guys, like just literally all guys. I'd been to a lot of tech things that were, women were certainly not the majority, but that like WWDC is much more of a, real discrepancy between the genders. So,
and that's still true. I've
it is still true.
I moved to San Francisco a couple years ago, and so I've been not actually in the conference, but around it the last 2 years, mm-hmm. and yeah, it's pretty much men.
Yeah.
And so is the idea? I know I've kind of heard this before, but it seems like the idea is that for these kids, they haven't seen someone. They probably haven't seen someone like them working in tech. And
exactly.
Because of that, if you can show them that there are people like them, because I think all the volunteers and teachers and stuff are, mm-hmm. Are representing those same groups, right? And
right.
so
exactly.
So they're showing them that, hey, there are people just like you who are doing this, and then showing them that if you want to do this, you could do it too, because they work, like you were saying, on a team to build an app. Is that mm-hmm. basically the gist of it?
Yeah, well, exactly. Like we have a huge support in the community of developers who, in particular, Apple third-party developers who like what we're doing and support the values. But I'm always having to turn them down as volunteers because I'm like, what we don't want to do is say bring in the men for the like building the app or coming and giving a talk to the girls or the youth who are at camp, and because we're creating an environment where you're seeing things can be different, and so to like backpedal and have some things that are just the same, it's a short week, and we really want to every experience. So it's not just the camp counselors, or as we call them, the project team leaders. Mm-hmm. It's actually we don't call them leaders, we call them managers, because we don't want we do as much as we can to not interfere with where the aspiring developers want to go. So we let them manage themselves insofar as that's possible, with guidance, especially obviously on the tech side, to make sure that they do something that is doable. So
yeah.
So as Gray, my co-founder, says, it's like it's like the bowling with the bumper lanes, where they bowl the ball, but if it goes too far towards the gutter, we bounce it back in.
That's a good description. So what does a typical week look like?
We do a lot of different stuff. It is not like a coding camp. We do teach them about code and about programming, but we also teach them about brainstorming and designing interfaces and icons. And there's usually a field trip to a tech company, local tech company. And on the last day of camp, Friday afternoon, we have a pitch session where the teams pitch their apps. They do a keynote presentation and promote and describe their apps to a panel of business leaders, investors, entrepreneurs, people from the community who are also, not men. So, because in my mind, I wanted the kids to see too that even on this level, where money is involved and where business is involved, it's also, there are people who look like you, who are like you in that field. Because, there are a lot of women and transgender people who work in the business end, the finance end of technology. And that might be the thing that interests a particular kid. And that is one of the things that's really good about having this whole range of activities that go on, is that maybe coding isn't going to be your thing, but maybe you do want to be a tester or a designer or a marketer.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that they're kind of being exposed to all the different parts of it, right? They have, I think you said a project manager, right? That they're seeing the project manager do stuff, which maybe they want to do that, or like design, test, development, and then obviously the business side as well, and like the pitching, marketing side. They're kind of seeing all the different parts of, almost like the different parts of the technology, the software business. Yeah, most of them there, and that's a really cool way to show what is possible, and yeah, that's really cool.
It's a camp that I wish existed when I was a kid.
Yeah,
because I mean, I didn't get into technology till fairly late in life, like my mid-30s, but I had always been interested in whatever technology. I mean, it was available when personal computer didn't really make the scene until I was in college. And I'm talking like the IBM PC. And I did work, I learned word processing. And then I took a, programming class in college where we used the punch cards and everything. I'm really old school.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know.
But nobody ever said like, hey, you could do that. You could do this. You could be a programmer. Like, why? And I just think, I remember actually at my high school, there was a mainframe computer that did all the like database records of the students and whatever. And there were like 3 students who worked on that computer along with, they were all boys. And it's like, if somebody had said like, would you like to see how the mainframe computer works and maybe help us on a project with it? I would have totally jumped on that. But I just assumed, I mean, certainly the era when I grew up in the 70s, it was definitely not sending me a lot of signals that I should question the natural order of men do the hard stuff and women do the easier creative stuff. So,
yeah, it's cool that you're taking kind of like what you learned from that and what you wish had been in the world back then, and you're actually making it happen today.
Yeah, it's super fun, and it definitely. It's hard work. The week of camp is very hard work for all the volunteers and also for the participants. We started with just the one camp in Portland. The first summer we did 2 sessions, and then the next summer we added a session in Seattle, and we have gone to several locations since then. And I just admire all the people who have, had the enthusiasm and energy to volunteer with us, because it's not like summer camp where you like play soccer and have snacks. I mean, we have snacks. We have a lot of snacks, but we don't have the brain power that's required. Like, just is very tiring, I think, for everybody.
Because you're also like, in teaching them how to do real work, you're doing real work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and which has been like an interesting byproduct of the program that I had not anticipated is, so my original idea was that all the staff would be iOS developers. like women iOS developers. But of course, there are, not enough, not enough available to really staff a camp, at any one time. And we sort of pivoted to where we said, well, the project team managers, they can learn what the girls are learning or what the youth are learning, but, with them and, help them as long as they're tech savvy. And so our first project team managers were like 2 customer support people and somebody who did Ruby on Rails. And so none of them had ever made an iOS app themselves, but they helped, because they could learn as the campers were learning. Mm-hmm. So fast forward a couple of years, those people, that Ruby developer became an iOS developer.
Oh, whoa.
One of the testers became an iOS developer because they, they're not only, they see themselves encouraging the campers to do this, think like, oh, if I tell them they can do it, I should be able to do it too. And so we have some interesting success stories at a completely different level, so it didn't, like the oldest, developer, one of the earliest participants from like 2013 is now in college. She's still not a iOS developer, right? And she may never be,
right.
But like, in other words, we haven't been around long enough to have like a bunch of developers in their 20s out there changing the ratio. But we have volunteers in their 30s who have already, made a difference. So that was very exciting for me.
That's cool. Yeah, it's mostly just a time game, right? Because how old are these students?
They are they're going into 8th or 9th grade when they do App Camp for Girls. So depending on, where they are school-wise, they might be 12, 13, or 14 usually.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And so they have a good, couple 3 years left in high school and then probably, I'm assuming, college. So it's going to take a while to get anyone who was inspired there to actually be like graduated and be a developer full time,
getting a job, right?
Right. But it's cool that I'm assuming. Do you have a way to keep in touch with these children afterwards and actually see what they end up doing?
Yeah, we do keep in touch. We to the extent that they keep in touch with us as well, and we have alumni meetups usually in the spring where we do some activities, some lightning talks by the participants, by the alumni will come and talk about what they've been doing and what they're doing next. And so things like, we still, we're a small organization in terms of the staff, and we are, in fact, in a transition mode ourselves right now because I did stop being the full-time manager of all of this.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I did. I realized after 5 summers, I thought, I'm not actually interested in being the executive director. If we were to fund a position to actually pay an executive director, we should get a professional executive director, somebody who has managed an organization. I mean, I'm doing it sort of by the seat of my pants with my, what makes sense to me, but I know that it's a business. Even if it's a nonprofit, it's still a business, and there's still accounting and taxes and HR and forecasting and all of that stuff.
Right.
It's not my forte, and I thought I could learn it. But even as I learned it, I thought, but I actually prefer to do more hands-on stuff at a lower level working with, you know, the camps, like supporting them as a volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just came back from Minneapolis last week. That was the launch of the app camp Minneapolis branch, and I helped the participants make the buttons. We have a button maker, and we make swag at the end of the week, which is very popular. And they use we print up their app icons and their team logos, and we make those into buttons. And I'm a really good button maker, and I'm a really good button making coach. And so helping them learn how to use the button maker and then having them teach each other, I get a lot of satisfaction out of that, much more so than I get from a spreadsheet that, you know, is the budget or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I was actually going to ask, like, how did you go about starting something like this? You hadn't done that before, I'm assuming. So
no. It's very important not to know anything about how to do it if you're going to do something like this. Because if you knew how to do it, you wouldn't do it. You would be just overwhelmed before you started. But if you think, you know, if you have a big idea and you just start chipping away at, like, well, what I need to do first is find out how we fund this, you know, and how we set it up, you know, from a legal point of view and that kind of stuff. I had a lot of help, obviously, and especially great advisors, a lot from the Apple and Mac using community. I was super lucky right off the bat. A really good friend of mine, a podcaster named David Sparks, who does a show called the Mac Power Users. Mm-hmm. He's a lawyer. I was talking to him about how I was frustrated with the legal side of things because I felt like I wasn't getting very clear advice. And he said, "Oh, well, I know this lawyer in Portland, you know, who you should totally hook up with him." And he introduced me, and that lawyer, Josh Barrett, ended up being like my guardian angel. And still, you know, I know he was just the kind of lawyer I could work with, who explained things in plain English and didn't make anything more complicated than it needed to be. But it was you could feel very confident that you were in good hands with his advice. And, you know, if I hadn't found him, I don't think I would have started the camp, because if I didn't feel confident that I was setting it up properly, mm-hmm. I would have felt very odd about raising money and how that money, you know, how the money would be raised and then how it would be spent. You know, that's not something you do like casually. So,
right. Yeah. You wanted to, like, I'm assuming it's like an official nonprofit.
Official nonprofit.
People can like write it off on their taxes and all of that kind of stuff, right?
Right. And, you know, so Josh helped me through the steps of that so that we could set up an Indiegogo campaign. And that's how we really got started. And we had a goal of $50,000, and we raised that in 3 days. And then I was like, you know, people were like, "What's your stretch goal?" I'm like, well, you know, if we raise 100, you know, we'll that will get us closer to, you know, starting up in another city. But I couldn't promise any one thing, you know, because we hadn't even done one camp yet. Yeah. I was like, I don't think. You know, I can't say, oh, $50,000 pays for a camp. I really hope it does, because that sounds like a lot of money. But until we actually do it, you know, and especially the equipment we have, you know, as you may have heard, Apple products are not exactly cheap. Right. We needed a lot of Apple products to, but not just Macs for the programming, but from the beginning, we had a set of iPod Touches that we used. We had one for every camper so that they could build their apps to a device, and then they could take that device home and show it off. And so we let kids run around with iPod Touches, and we let them take them home every night, and we never lost an iPod Touch, as far as I know. because now I'm not the director anymore, so it's not on my head if we lose an iPod Touch. But I was pretty impressed that, people, those were like $300 devices. And now we give them iPad Pros. So, once the iPad Pro came out with the pencil, it was like, oh, that will be awesome at App Camp. And they do all their artwork on the iPad Pro now.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So what's the current number of? You listed a bunch of cities earlier, but how many camps do you do a year?
It really varies because it's so volunteer driven, and the person who could devote their entire life to making App Camp happen one year might not be able to do that the next year, and we might not have somebody in place who can just take over. It's something we're working on to give us more continuity, figure out how to support the volunteers better, so that that it is possible for people to not. I mean, if you're an App Camp volunteer, you're taking a whole week off of work. And, that if you have a job, maybe they'll support you as a volunteer, but maybe not. If you're a contractor or a freelancer, that's a week of work, you don't get paid for. We actually have always had stipends for the volunteers because just to ameliorate some of that. So, something that is an amount that is not what they're worth, but at least something to help defray their expenses of having, to give up a week of work. So that, as I said, as we get bigger and start, having professional advisors helping us to identify long-range goals and how to get there. We have a 3-year plan now. We did a strategic planning process with our board and also with members of the community, including like parents and teachers and volunteers and iOS developers, people who could contribute their perspectives on how we could move forward from being, really what I call handcrafted artisanal summer camp program to something that can really scale a little bit better. But the short answer is this summer we were Portland, Seattle, and Minneapolis. We have also been in Phoenix, Orange County, and Vancouver, and Chicago. And I hope we'll have camps in those locations again, but we didn't, we couldn't swing it this summer, for various reasons.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's cool to hear that it's been successful for long enough that it's now kind of in that next transition where it's got to go from kind of like a baby camp to a grown up adult camp that I don't know if that's the best way to put it or not.
A camp with a paid staff, which is what we have now, and with more board members. We were a very tiny board to begin with. Basically, my sister and my friend, who's the designer of the logo, and who are also in the tech industry, not just, I didn't just say, oh, I need my sister to do this. And now she's president of the board, and I'm not even on it. So she's the boss of App Camp, I guess you could say. But we expanded the board a couple of times, and we're still, identifying people who can work with us, who share those values and have the passion for our mission. We have a permanent executive director who came from another nonprofit where she was, the fundraising director. So you do learn pretty quickly, like nonprofit, all the cool things you want to do at camp don't go anywhere without the fundraising muscle.
Right. Yeah. That's cool. I didn't know that you had brought on like full-time paid staff, like an executive director and all that stuff. That's a huge step. That's really impressive.
Yeah. I feel very happy seeing all the things that are happening with App Camp that don't need me to make them go.
Yeah.
And I'm still very committed to the camp. I am not on the board. I wanted to take a leave from that as well and focus on Microdot Blog. And also, I want to give other people a chance to step up and shape it with their vision. It's good to have a variety of points of view and input, and not make it just my personal fiefdom where I'm in charge of everything.
Yeah, that's good. So how can people help with App Camp for Girls?
Well, as long as we're talking about fundraising, the funds are always welcome, and we do some big fundraisers, like at WWDC. We do a really fun show with James Dempsey and the Breakpoints, which is a nerd favorite band. Usually it's at a club, and we sell tickets, but we have sponsors for the show, so the tickets revenue all goes to App Camp. That's our biggest fundraiser every year, and that's because James Dempsey is just an amazing, wonderful person who suggested that why don't we turn my usual show into a fundraiser, and it's been a really fun collaboration with him. Then, we have volunteers, certainly, or people or companies that would like to maybe step up and help sponsor a camp to make it go. So, for example, this past week in Minneapolis, we were totally supported by Jamf software.
Oh, yeah.
And the camp was at their headquarters. They gave us wonderful space, and they also supported all the campers, like they gave scholarships to all the campers. So,
whoa.
So that kind of, having a company that wants to make a difference in this realm, maybe, working with us to put on App Camp in your city, in your location, is a thing to do. I think the Jamf employees were really happy with how it turned out. They all came to the final pitch session, or they didn't all come, but we had a pitch session, was in their public space, and a lot of Jamf employees were there, and I think that they really enjoyed seeing the results of this week of young people working on iOS apps and being really proud of their work and being very entertaining in presenting them.
Yeah. So I will link. I was just looking around your site. Mm-hmm. There's like a volunteers page that I'll link to, and a supporters page.
Yeah.
And then also like a contribute page. So if anybody, I think there's like a way to donate there or pledge or things like that as well. So I'll go ahead and put that in the show notes if any of you are interested in the mission of App Camp and want to support that. I know I've supported it over the years, and a lot of people I know have. It's definitely something that I want to keep around. So I'll link that as well.
Cool.
Yeah. So I actually also wanted to talk a little bit about what you worked at Smile Software.
Yes.
Which is like TexExpander and PDFpen and a bunch of other things over the years that I've used.
Oh yeah, cool.
Yeah, how did you end up there, and what did you do for them?
So I ended up there. So Smile was started by two software engineers, Philip Goward and Greg Scown, and Philip was my neighbor, and we lived in the same little apartment complex in Portland. And Greg actually worked for one of my sisters in her startup in Silicon Valley.
Oh, wow.
And so my sister, not me, she introduced them to each other at a Macworld because they said they were both looking, for people to collaborate with. And so Philip and Greg ended up being like the best successful matchmaking my sister has ever done.
That's such a cool story.
Yeah, Smile is just finished its 15th year, and it's pretty. And they work really well together, and they're really great people and great software developers, and also great business people. So Philip asked me to help them on their website. I guess that's how it started. I was a freelance web designer at the time.
Okay.
And so I started working on the website, and then I started doing some promotional type stuff because it was just the two of them in the beginning. And so they were doing all the customer support, all the development, all the, everything that was kind of marketing related. And over, the course of a couple of years, I just continued to do more and more until they decided they wanted me to work with them full time and eventually to be a partner there. So that's how it got started for me. And I was doing everything that wasn't code or the business, executive stuff that we've already established is not my strong suit. Right. We were a small company, even just the three of us. And my goal was to, do as much PR, as I could. We didn't have like big marketing budget or anything like that, but we just started getting out on Twitter, for example, starting a blog. We didn't have a blog. And then I met some podcasters at Macworld. Oh yeah, working at the booth at Macworld. That's how it started. They asked me to work at the booth because it was their first time at Macworld San Francisco, and I just went. I had no idea except that I sounded cool to go to Macworld, so I went. Right. And it was cool, and it was definitely, that was 2004, and then from then, I started to become in charge of the booth because I was the marketing person. And I met podcasters. I just started listening to podcasts like 2006. And then I got, it was suggested like maybe we should sponsor podcasts. And I was very nervous about it because, it was money. It wasn't even tons of money. We're not talking about sponsoring something, huge, but it was the best move ever. And once we sponsored one and we saw how that was successful, I just started looking for other podcasts to sponsor. And so a lot of my time there was spent listening to podcasts and meeting up with podcasters and making plans with, what products we wanted to promote on podcasts. But generally, that was super fun. And I would do, the kind of PR, like standard PR, writing press releases and talking to writers, tech writers, journalists, and such. And the company just kept growing, and it's still growing today. It's really impressive how it's turned out. But for me, once I got involved with App Camp for Girls and saw how much time it was going to take, I thought it was going to be like a little hobby thing that I did on the side, but it didn't turn out that way. And I just felt like, as I'm the kind of person, if the choice is between the safe, established thing, versus the challenging, not established, wacky thing, I tend to go for the latter.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. It's cool to hear the story of how Smile came about. Yeah, especially I think I maybe first heard about their stuff on a podcast. And I listened to podcasts for years starting maybe when I was like 13, 14 probably is when when I first started. And listening to Mac power users and all of that stuff way back in the day, and started using TexExpander. I don't know, a long time ago.
Yeah, it's I would say like, I don't know, but if you say you heard about it on a podcast, that wouldn't surprise me, because at one point, I can't remember exactly how many we were sponsoring, but I had a spreadsheet that scrolled. So.
Yeah. I can't. It was a long time ago, so I don't know if it actually was or not. But it could have just been somebody, not even an ad, but somebody talking about it. Yeah. I feel like that happens a lot too. Like once something is a piece of software is used as advertising on podcasts a lot, then it just kind of comes up in conversation in other ones, which is, I think, part of the value of podcast advertising.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's different than a straight ad, and podcasts are more and more getting that kind of like, straight ad spots, where somebody reads something that they got from the company. But for me, like the most interesting one is like, you just say, yeah, just talk about TexExpander and this new feature or whatever. And they do, and in their own words, and that's for one reason. I always looked for people who already liked Smile products. Like I didn't want to have to convince somebody to try to use it. I just wanted them to talk about their own experience using it. So that it wasn't hard because the Smile products are so good. So
yeah, no, yeah, that's cool. Well, to round out the show, what is one thing that you find unusual in tech right now?
I should have had the answer all set up. I knew it was coming. Okay, so here's an unusual thing I think about Microdot Blog, and not to over promote Microdot Blog, but it's so fascinating to me to watch like a new community build and a new culture come from people who are tired of the old culture. And one of the things that really impresses me is that I haven't had to do much, hardly any community moderation, because the community moderates itself. And people who are, there will be like arguments about something, and maybe somebody goes a little too far in their language or stridency. Nothing like, nothing on the level of like Twitter nastiness, but just like something to speak in a way you wouldn't say to somebody in person. And then I'll look at that and I'll think, maybe I need to let that person know that that doesn't really fly here to mock, say mock another person. That's one of the things I don't like. It's not necessarily banned, under our guidelines, but it's just not good manners. So what I've noticed though is people then like sort of backtrack and apologize.
What?
And they say like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said X. And then the other person says like, yeah, it's, apology accepted. I know it was like a hot button topic, and, we all need to like think about these things a little differently. And I know sometimes, I get carried away too. I'm like, what? Like, that is unusual from my experience elsewhere on the internet. And I think it's just one of the ways that's is a hallmark of how a community could be nourished and nurtured, where people respect the humanity in each other, because that's what it is. That's, you recognize it's another human being on the other side of that account name, and however much you disagree with them, calling them, a name is just no good. And so, and that's not just Microdot Blog. I think in general, people are wanting to get back to a more respectful tone and more civil discussions than they're offered in other locations on the internet.
Yeah, the pendulum has definitely swung way far out there to I think everyone who spends very much time on social media of any kind is fed up with how just how frustrating it is to read people's just meanness. That's interesting to see that it may be swinging back, at least in some areas. Do you think that is a something that will actually occur at scale, like at
right.
something that has the number of users as a Facebook or a YouTube or a Twitter or whatever it may be?
Probably not, but that's not our goal. That's not our mission to be anything close to the size of a Facebook or YouTube. The one like that I think of, and I'm just talking about this, impressionistically. I couldn't give you the exact details, but Flickr, used to be a really supportive community of each other, for people sharing their photographs, and then it was acquired, and then it goes on into another direction, and kind of like the basic. People knew who the founders of Flickr were. There was 2 people, and they founded it. And I think as long as Manton Reese, who is the founder of Microdot Blog, is involved, you sort of set a tone and an expectation from the top. And I think Twitter is really seeing how that's working out for them. But and Manton has no intention of leaving or selling, or it's not. This is a mission and a lifelong, project, not a startup looking for funders at all.
And I think you can tell just in the way it's structured, right? Like like you were saying around Twitter, like the founders, we're seeing some of the results of the early decisions and like the structural decisions that were made by them that we're now seeing negative effects of. And then the same thing with Facebook, right? Like Zuckerberg has, you can clearly see his direction in Facebook becoming what it is today. And so that's actually really encouraging about Micro.blog. If it's very, very different, right? It's not set up to be another one of those, right? And it seems like in the way you've explained it that the vision and the goal is really something that everybody wants to see on the internet. And then the question is just whether it can it can be executed on.
Yeah. Well, we feel pretty optimistic about the whole enterprise because we have a clear funding model, which does not involve advertising or any manipulation of your work at all. It's a hosting platform, and that's a proven business model, and it's a different take on hosting, but it is still we're offering something that people are already paying more than $5 a month for in other with other companies, and we're offering in some cases more than, like I like to say, it's easier than WordPress and it's cheaper than Squarespace.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I do. Yeah, that's really interesting. I like that it does have a clear way to make money. That's one thing that I look for in these companies that are out there that are doing interesting things. Oftentimes when you're not sure how they'll make money, it's because they're making money in a way that they don't want you to know about.
Right.
So no, that's really good. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
So where can people find you on the internet, Jean?
Well, if you go to MacGenie, that's MACG. Well, I should give my actual custom domain name, which is micro.welltempered.net. Is my where my microblog lives. That's where I write, and you can that's my blog, but it also has links to the Microdot.blog timeline. So if you want to see what is going on over there, if you're on Micro.blog, you can just follow me there at MacGenie, or Twitter, follow me there, but don't expect to see me around that much. I'm weighing my options over Twitter, or certainly happy to have email, which is just Jean at Micro.blog.
Cool. And what do you think? What do you call blogs on Micro.blog? Is it blogs or is it micros or microblogs or?
But they're micro blogs. I mean, Twitter is strictly a microblogging platform, right? You only do 280 characters. That's it. Micro.blog, you can actually write long blog posts on it. So I think we're just calling them blogs. But yeah, that is like one of the things like that evolves over time. But in the beginning, we really focused on the fact that you would just write short blog posts, like, because people like things like Twitter because it's so easy. You don't write a title, you just write a couple sentences and click and boom, you've published something. But so we've tried to keep that aspect of Twitter, but that when you do that, you're creating a blog post on your own blog that's yours. And you can, if you start writing a post in Microdot.blog and it goes over 280 characters, a title field opens up and you can just keep writing and make it like a traditional, lengthier blog post. And then what will happen in the timeline is the title will show up with a link to your microblog. So I guess we're calling them microblogs, even though they have some macro posts in them.
Oh, I like that a lot. That's something that I actually had wished that Twitter would do forever ago. Like, because all these people do their tweet storms and all this stuff in it. They get storms. Unconnected, and then they have numbers, and it's like 1, 2, 7, and you're like, well, I can't see the other ones because they replied to the same one 3 times, or I don't know.
Yeah,
I like that idea of you're writing your post, and if it gets longer, then it just turns into a linked post. That's really, really smart. I don't have a Micro.blog account or anything, but I'll have to look into it.
Yeah, I think it's worth giving it a shot, and then come to it with like beginner's mind, not expecting it to be just like Twitter, because it's not. We don't show how many followers you have. We don't show. We don't have hashtags. We don't have the kinds of things that will allow people to over amplify their message, or to harass people. We aren't using those things over at Micro.blog, and once people get used to it, they actually kind of like it. And now you could really start a fight on Micro.blog by saying like, hey, we should be able to see all our followers, and people will be like, no, we don't want that. So yeah, definitely give it a chance.
Yeah, I'll check it out. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Jean.
I really enjoyed it. It was very nice chatting with you.